this now, so we have it for later. So anyway, where were we here? So yes, so these are the blade files, and more or less. We can go ahead and look at the student file here. So if you click into contact, right, this corresponds to a student page here, and you can see that sometimes in your naming conventions, students kind of referring to the full collection of data versus student, which is a single entity here. So if we open up that student file, again, we're doing something very similar here. So we're still using that layouts folder. As you can see, we still have the navigation up here, the same sort of background. We want all that CSS. So that's working really nicely for us here. If there are sessions here, so if there's any session data for the status that we want to display, so for instance, when they submitted this form, it says a nice little message, hey, that was successful, or uh-oh, you've got to do it again, based on how our server was able to process that request. We can display that information really nicely. Out of the box, Laravel has CSRF protection, or cross-site scripting protection. So you can include this little helper in there. And if we inspect our form, let's take a peek here. Jump into the source code a little bit. We get this really nice hidden input field with our CSRF token that gets included in our requests back to the server. So that way we make sure we're protecting against cross-site scripting attacks. So it has a lot of built-in security for us that we don't necessarily have to worry about wiring up for ourselves. What else do we have going on? We've got some great validation in here. So let's see here. If I try to submit this form, and it comes back, this was server-side validation, right? We don't have to worry about that. Laravel makes it super, super easy for us to get up and running with that. So our forms take care of themselves. Almost. We got to do a little bit of work, but it feels like it's taken care of. And all we have to do down here is say, okay, we're just going to use the default Bootstrap classes. If we have this error for this field, we're going to actually display it, and then just grab that error and make sure that we're displaying it here. So again, that's all that we're really doing here. And then we keep using this blade syntax, these double curly braces, to inject PHP or dynamic data into the blade template here. And that is more or less the view section of Laravel. So it's pretty easy to get up and running with and get started. If you know HTML and you learn a little bit of blade syntax, which is analogous to PHP or any other programming language, if you're familiar with JavaScript, you know what an if statement is, you know what a for each is. You just have these handy little helpers in here that will get you started. And they all follow this general syntax. You have the @ for some more conditional logic, some higher level logic. And then to inject data in, you just use this double curly bracket here. So we're actually passing the student information and just grabbing some properties off of that object, right? We're off of that data. So their first name, and then we're concatenating it with a space in between, and then their last name. And that's giving us this nice little context vernice here. So that is all that is going on here. Pretty straightforward. So that's kind of the V section of our MVC model here. So let's start talking a little bit more about controllers and how those work out. Let's kind of hop into so we were in the resources directory, and that's all good, so we can kind of close this out. Now let's take a look in our app directory. And the app directory is where a lot of our logic and business logic is going to happen and live in Laravel. And so we've got a couple of folders in here, and we've got these two files up here as well. And so these two files are what we call models within Laravel. And models have one-to-one relationships, more or less, with the database table here. And as you can imagine, we have a users table, right? Because we have some sort of authentication system. We have Lambda admins logging in, adding students. And then we have some student tables as well. So that's how we're displaying all the students in on the page there. And we can add more, and we can work with them and manipulate them. And so that is these models have one-to-one relationships with the database. That doesn't mean that every database table needs a model. And what models let us do is they let us store data, they let us add methods and functionality to these sort of entities within our code, within our business logic. So for instance, our user class has actually, that's a bad example here. Let's look at the student class. Yeah, so in student class, we've got this method for path, which just tells us the path to that student within our application here. And so it's a super easy little helper function that helps us make sure that we're always using the same path for the student. So we always know exactly how to get to their page. So you can store this sort of logic here. And you can also, out of the box, Laravel is protecting against mass assignment. So what happens is somebody can hit your, for instance, if you're not protecting against mass assignment and you kind of let any endpoint be open and somebody just passes through a bunch of property names and with values, and all of a sudden those are getting overwritten within your database structure, that's not a good thing to have happen here. So for instance, on our users table, our users model, making sure that the remember token is something that we're keeping hidden and not fillable here. So that is something that we just want to make sure that is not going to be able to get overwritten without our explicit consent. So it has a lot of security baked into it that we don't have to worry about here. But models help us as well because of the eloquent ORM. So that is basically how Laravel is pulling information out of the database. You can write raw SQL if you want to, or whatever sort of language. I think there's a Mongo adapter as well. There might be a GraphQL implementation. But for the most part, we're using MySQL, SQLite, Postgres with this as well. I've kind of used all three of those in various capacities or another. And the Eloquent ORM is how we work with that. It's basically an active record implementation for working with our database. And so these models let us use Eloquent as needed. So within our controllers here, so let's start hopping into the C section of our MVC. How are we giving the data to our views? So here we've got this HTTP folder within app. And you can see we've got controllers, we've got middleware. We've got a little bit of bootstrapping information here as well. Let's look at the student controller. I think this will be pretty useful for us. So as we can see here, this is how we're querying our database and getting the information out. And this is Eloquent in a nutshell here. So what this is doing is we're saying, hey, we have the student model. We want to make sure we're getting student data. We're going to have a little bit of manipulation to this data, right? We want to order it by descending, so we have the latest student that we added first, and that is according to our business logic. That could change. And then we've asked Laravel to paginate this information for us, so we're not showing every student and overwhelming the page with a ton of data. We're saying, okay, just give us 6 here. And what that does is that gives us a collection. So that was that terminology we used a little bit earlier here. Everything from Eloquent returns a collection for us. And that's really helpful because Laravel has some really wonderful helper methods that we can use on any collection. So for instance, I think we can die and dump this just like that. So let's go ahead. Yeah, so now we've died and dumped all this data, this whole collection. And notice how it says collection up here. That's because that's what it is. And we can just DD all of this information straight to the page for ourselves here, which is super, super nice. We can start taking a look at it, inspecting the data as needed. So when you're going back and forth between your database and your view models, this becomes really powerful. Another really powerful one, that was a lot of information. So maybe we want to do 2 array or something like that, just to make it a little bit easier for us to read. And we'll have to die and dump that a little differently this time. And now, so this has a lot of pagination information on it. You can see in the request here, Laravel is taking care of that for us. And then this data is here as well. So we can see we've got our all of our students here who are on the page. So Laravel just out of the box and working with collections makes it super easy to start working with data and making it making it very easy for us to just get up and running with it. Let's see, we've got this we've got this ID here of 11. So let's see if we can write some other data or other logic here. I think we can do find. Let's see. It's been a second since I've played with Laravel. Yeah, and so that just gave us this student record here. I need to look at the attributes, and that is the ID that we were looking for, right? So as you learn the API, it becomes very, very easy for you to very quickly manipulate data without necessarily having to use a whole bunch of SQL or a whole bunch of query statements and fors and loops and everything to massage it just the way you want it. Laravel takes care of that in a lot of ways for us, which is pretty awesome. You can do maps and stuff like that. So a lot of concepts from JavaScript are also fairly applicable in collections here and other languages. I'm sure JavaScript isn't the only language with maps. It's cool. So that's sort of our index function here. And the way this works is our controllers are used by our routing system to let the page know what exactly we should be rendering here. So as you can see, we're making this query, this Eloquent ORM essentially query, to get all the student information. And then we're returning a view. So this is how we make sure that we return that HTML with the content in it instead of just like data or something like that, we could return JSON here if we wanted to make an API instead of an actual application. And so this was corresponding to our resources directory, to our views, and to students, just like that. So we have that blade file just getting called right here. So it's very easy. Everything is right there ready for you. And we're just compacting or sending this variable name down for Laravel to use. And as we saw down here, right, that's exactly what we called it within our controller. So our students are accessible within this blade file because we're passing it through, because we're sharing that data to it. And the way the page knows through our routing structure that the controller is here is through this routes directory. So if you open up routes, out of the box, Laravel lets you define all sorts of routes here. It's very easy for you to build an API with Laravel. They've got this sort of, with like really good authentication. They've got a first-party package called Laravel Passport. So you can do API authentication very easily and quickly. So if you want to bring that into your project, it's very easy to get up and running with it. But the main, and channels, I think that's for WebSockets. Console is for sort of console routes if you want to add that to your project for whatever reason. And then this web is how we're defining the routes for our application. So as you can see, we're just making a GET request to the main route, the root of our file here, our folder structure here, and on our server. And then we're just saying, hey, for the student controller, which is what we were looking at earlier, use this index method and just return whatever it's returning. And as we can see, so we're just saying student controller at index, and this is the syntax. So student controller, we're here, and just use the index file to return this data from this route. So it's really quick and powerful to sort of get this information out of the database and pass down to a view. So let's see here. So we've talked about the controller side of things. We talked about the view side of things. Now let's talk about the database. So within Laravel, you have this database folder here. And so it's possible to have factories, migrations, and seeds. So super, super useful stuff for testing purposes, for that TDD that we were talking about a little bit earlier, for setting up migrations, factories, populating your database with information. It's all right here, all super useful. So if we make a little bit more space, you can see that we have this migration, which is defining our database schema for us. So if we pop this guy open, we can see that all we have to do to essentially create a table is create a migration file and add the sort of logic in here, this API, this table API. And so what we're saying here is, okay, we want to have a table, a column that is for first name and for last name, and those should both be strings. We want to have an email column, and that should be unique, right? We want to make sure that we're not, we don't have duplicate students based on their emails in here, so that we can do that very quickly, right? We just have to add this unique method to it, or yeah, eloquent, fluent method here. The bio should be a little bit longer, so we just have to add some long text to it. Timestamps, that sort of comes out of the box, so that's a way for us to have a created at and an updated at file, and it's really super, super easy to kind of get all this information. And as you saw earlier when we were sort of dying and dumping all this information here, that's exactly what our student record looks like. So let's just find one again, and we'll say to array. And if we go back to the page here, oh, we don't need to translate that from Latin. But as you can see, everything that we were defining is right here, really nice and easy. And these are the timestamps that I was talking about, the created at and the updated at. So Laravel takes care of that for us. We don't even have to think about it. We should think about it, but it just makes it super, super easy with those sort of same defaults. And so that defines our schema for us and how the data is being stored and accessed in our database. So that is more or less the model view controller setup of Laravel. So again, we've got views under views inside of resources. So the top level directory is resources. Hop into views, and we can define what our UI is supposed to be looking like over here. Then we go ahead, we create ourselves a controller, and we say, okay, this is going to be great. We're going to have our student controller. This is where we're going to store a lot of this logic for the business logic of extracting the information out of the database and manipulating it in whatever way we need to, and where it needs to go. We've got our routes file, our web.php, and that's saying, okay, we're going to do this, just have this go straight to the home page here. That's all good. And then our migration is saying, okay, the students table should look like this. This is the data that we have on it. And this is how we're going to start modeling this information. And that's it. It can be that simple. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of other folders in here and a whole bunch of additional information, but at its core, that is really what Laravel is offering. A really simple and easy way to get up and running and start coding real business logic and valuable features for your applications. So at this point, are there any questions on the core sort of Laravel experience? I don't see too many in the chat, but maybe we can take a pause here if anyone has any. And feel free to throw them right in the Zoom chat here. I think that'd be useful. All righty, no questions from Ivan. That's all right. All righty then. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them in. I'll go, can you increase the editor size by, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. Totally do that. Let's see here, text size, or font size rather. Font, there we go. That can be better. Hopefully that's better. Cool. So I think that helps me even. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we've kind of talked about the big picture here. Let's look at some more sort of specific details as well. Let's go ahead and check out some other views here. So this is going to work for us. Great. No, thank you. So if we go to this contact page here, the student page itself, this is a form, right? And so this has a little bit of a different logic. It's not a simple get, not a simple database query, right? We've got to have a post here to create some details. And like I said earlier, we've kind of got this nice validation out of the box. So how are we doing this? How is Laravel letting us do this? Let's go, I think, back to our student controller. And as you can see here, out of the box, you can have Laravel generate RESTful method names within your controllers for you. So you don't necessarily have to remember all the REST verbs. You can kind of have them out of the box. If you didn't want them, you could also set it up so it only creates the ones you need. Or none at all. So, but if you like them, I generally try to keep using them and kind of stay consistent to that. But out of the box, it can include all those methods on those controllers for you, which is pretty nice. So what we were doing, and so that's store request. So let's see, let's make sure we look at our web file, our routes file first. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying, is this this line right here. So we're making a post request to students and then student, right? So we have the ID of that student, so that way we can reference them. And then contact. And then I'm actually in the wrong controller, so we gotta look at the right one. And then the student contact controller at store. So that's that same logic there. So as we can see here, we're in our student contact controller. We have the store method on that controller. And we're passing in two different details here. We're passing in the request information. So that's everything that's coming from the form, really important as well. And then we're also doing this sort of route model binding, as Laravel calls it, and we're passing in the student as well. And if you notice here, in this little section, kind of this curly brace wildcard approach here, we're kind of saying, hey, if we have an ID at this slot, that's a student ID, and we're going to want that. And so Laravel all says, okay, that's no problem, because you've told me this, and because you gave me this nice little, I think, type hint here, you're good to go, right? Here's your information, and here's your student, which is very, very useful for us. So the first thing we do is we have this sort of little validation section here. So this is the request. This is all the request data that gets posted through. So if we just dive and dump that, maybe we could say all. Let's see what happens here. So this is all that information, right? That was coming from our form. The form made the post request up to the route, and we just dive and dump that. And as you can see, everything here is null, and we have that CSRF token here. That's what this token is. It's from that CSRF protection, that hidden field that we have that makes sure everything we're doing on our site is legit. So that's what's going on there. And so what we're saying here is, hey, validate all this data for us. And Laravel makes it really, really super easy. We don't have to write like crazy nested if statements and say, all right, if this is null, then return, or abort 404, or not even 404. This would be like a 302 or something like that. We don't have to worry about any of that logic. We just say, hey, the name field is required, and we have to come up with our nice little array here. And within Laravel's documentation here, so you can see all these fields are required. Even in email, though, we can say, hey, we want this to be a unique field on the students table. That's all this is saying. And we can also do fun stuff, right? We can say we would like this email, this field to be an email field. So do some email validation for us as well. And it's pretty good. It takes care of the job for us here. So if we go back to the Laravel documentation, you can just go to validation. You could check out the available validation rules. And as you can see, there's tons and tons of rules here. We could check if the data is a Boolean, if it's JSON, if it's an IP address. Excuse me. Tons of things that Laravel is taking care of for us out of the box, like integer. That could be super useful. Date format equals. So all these really great things. There's some file validation here if we wanted to make sure that everything is a JPEG or something like that. It's really super simple and super easy for us to do this relatively complicated validation here. So now when the student posts that, or when somebody posts a form to that student, we have that email getting sent out. And we kind of took a look at that a second ago, right? So if I said, like my name's Henry and I work for Tuxedos, and my name would be Henry at tux.com. I'd like to hire you, right? All of a sudden, we just hit this message, and that's all good. And over in Mailtrap, we've got our email, right? This was sent. If we look at who it was being sent to, this is that user's email. And it's all getting taken care of right here. So really, really nice. And we didn't code this email template. That comes out of the box with Laravel. And it's actually written in Markdown, so it's pretty simple for us to get started here. So what we have here is Laravel's got a mail system, a mail facade. So we just say to, and we use that route model binding. We grab that student from the URL, and we say, hey, send this to the student's email. We don't have to make a query here or import that data. It's here for us. There is a query happening, but we don't have to necessarily wire it up. We just say, hey, just grab this from the URL. We've got the data there anyway. We've got that unique identifier. And now we have access to all the students' data. And so we could say, send them an email, and send them this student contact email. So if we open up this file here, and this is what I love about PHP Storm, you can kind of command click into things, and it's really easy to move around your controller or your application. So in our app directory, we have this mail directory here, and this is not active by default. When you create a mail to the command line, this is what gets sent through. And as you can see, it's pretty simple, right? We have this constructor function, which is setting the details. So in here, this validated data, all this information that we're passing through is getting passed through to our email. And that's why it's showing up over here, right? All these details came from our form. So this is all the information that's coming through. And as we can see here, this is saying, okay, give us this information, pass it through down to the blade file that is rendering this. And we know that this is a markdown blade file, and it's in our resources controller. So we go to views, we go to emails. So this syntax here, whenever you see something in a view sort of setup, and it's emails dot, the dot is for a directory, right? To go down a level. So emails is a directory. We know this is in the views folder. So emails.studentcontact, and here we can see it. And this is all written in pretty simple markdown here. So we've got an H1. You've got a new job lead. We've kind of got a nice little emoji in there. We're doing a little bit of light HTML editing. And then we're just outputting the details here. And because that information, so validated data, this will always be an array after it gets validated here. We're just using some array syntax here to get these details out. And then send them over to our email here and just output them like this. So this is really simple and really easy to get set up with email, just like that. You're right off the bat, you can start using it. And then we just redirect back to the page, and we flash that session status message like we talked about. So that is another sort of a little bit more of a complicated example of how our controller in Laravel is doing a lot of work for us here. Awesome. So a little while ago, I kind of showed us let me go back here. this sort of register section. And I said that only admins are allowed to register. So if we go ahead and try to do somebody else, so if we say Tim and Tim at tim.com, and a really secure password here, and they try to register, they have to be a Lambda School employee to register. And we kind of said, okay, well, what if they try to do something like this, where they just do lambdaschool.com at whatever their domain is, right? That would be a sneaky way for them to maybe break our validator. And that's annoying. There we go, hit register. And still, we're able to catch this here, right? And so this obviously cannot be out of the box Laravel, right? This is a little bit extra validation logic that we had to go ahead and code. But it's super, super easy to add custom validation when you need it, which you'll reach for from time to time. So if we go into our controllers, right? And so that's hitting the register controller. And out of the box, Laravel provides all of these controllers for us, right? We don't have to scaffold the authentication. Laravel takes care of that out of the box. So we've got this register controller in here. And all of this was already here and written for us. But we can come in here and change a few things if we need to. And so what I decided to change was this validator, right? And I wanted to say, hey, make sure that the email comes from Lambda staff. And so I wrote a class that made sure that anyone who's putting in their email was actually from Lambda staff. And this is actually a little bit of a contrived example because you would do it, I think, fairly differently. You'd probably have a more of a whitelist approach than the approach that I'm taking here. But all I'm doing in this validator is saying, okay, in order to make sure this passes, give me the value that was passed through. So you can grab the attribute, which would be the name of the field, or the value. And you could say, okay, I'm exploding it on the @ so I've got the URL. Grabbing the second part of that exploded. So basically this is coming through as a string. I'm saying, okay, at the @ symbol, explode it. So that gives me an array with the 0 spot being everything before the @ and then the next spot being everything after it. So give me the URL there. And then I'm kind of saying, okay, if that URL, the second part of it, is equal to lambdaschool.com, then they're good to go. If not, and this is a little bit more PHP. This is not Laravel per se. So you have to know a little bit of PHP to get up and running with Laravel, but it works. And if it's wrong, we just if they don't pass this test, all we have to say is you must be a Lambda School employee to register. And so really quickly, as you can see here, we can add some custom validation logic, which can be really a complicated procedure. I've written my own validators for Vue.js and for other frameworks, and it takes forever, right? You're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I've got to think of all these edge cases. I've got to write up all this extra logic. It's just so time consuming. But here with Laravel, you just new up a new validator class and you're good to go. And that, I don't know if we showed everybody, that is in the rules directory here. And again, this won't be in a Laravel project off the bat. When you create your first validator, Laravel takes care of that for you. So it will add this rules directory. And then you've got Lambda staff right there, and you can write your logic in here. And of course, this is all super well documented within Laravel's documentation here. So all we have to do if we wanted to create a custom validator, let's come down to custom validation rules. And there are actually a lot of different ways to use it. So we can create the class like we did just now. What else? How else can we do this? We can just write a closure inline if we wanted to. If it was something that I didn't think I was going to be reusing or repeating a lot. And actually, that might have been a better call for what we were doing. But you can definitely do it however you like. Or you can extend, kind of getting a little bit more complicated there. But you can see Laravel is not a framework that kind of says this is the one way to do it. You have to do it our way. They give you options, and they let you code the way you want to code. So now all of a sudden, we've got Tim. Let's say Tim decides to say, OK, I'm just gonna go ahead and put in an email, and maybe I can grab it as needed. So I'll go ahead and put in a real secure password here and register. But now Laravel makes it really easy for you to do simple validation, where you could just log in, sign in, but it also, out of the box, will let you have email verification in your authentication as well, which is super, super awesome. You don't have to write all that logic. Having written that logic before, it's again, super time consuming. There are a lot of edge cases you need to consider. Dealing with emails is never super fun. And so it can be a time-consuming process that could be better spent building the business logic and the valuable features in your application here. And so if we go back to Mailtrap, we can see we've got this nice verify email. And all the user has to do is come in here, and they've taken care of so many like little details for you that you just don't have to think about. It's grabbing Lambda School. We've got this nice button here. We've got this sort of accessibility selection over here. So it's really super awesome. So if they click on that verify email, boom, they're done. They're in. They're into the system now, and they're good to go. So if we refreshed our other page, it would start working. They have access to the admin section. And that's just a little bit of extra security for us. So that way somebody couldn't just put in a Lambda email and just get access to our admin. They have to verify it. So they have to be in possession of that email. So just a little bit extra security for us there. So all right, so I think this is looking pretty good here. So now I'm thinking we should probably, I think one of the best ways to learn a framework, to get more familiar with it, is to practice with it, to use it to code out a feature here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's log out here. And I'm trying to think of what kind of feature we probably need. Maybe we shouldn't have this be the admin section locked down to admins. Maybe it would make more sense if we let anybody register for an account, and maybe that way they could favorite students and keep a running list, or at least have a list of who they've reached out to. Maybe that would make more sense. So let's go ahead and get that scaffold up here as a little bit of an exercise. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is change this register controller. So we can actually just get rid of this validation rule. Nice. And so now anybody can sign up for our application. It's that simple. They still need to do the double auth with the email, but now we've gotten rid of that whole validation rule. So we've taken that out of our register controller here. But we still probably want to make sure that we're making some consideration of who is an admin and who is not. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our users table, and we're probably going to want to have a Boolean, right? Or maybe it could be a string, and maybe it could be like their role. So role management, kind of important here. So let's go ahead and say we'll have a role for them. And then by default, and so Laravel has a nice little handy default helper, we can just call this guest or something like that, right? So we don't have to worry about that at all. And then for our inside of our user model, we can go ahead and add guests to something that's fillable or mass assignable. Sorry, that shouldn't be guests, that should be role. Alrighty here. So probably it would be useful if we had a method on our user to check if they're an admin or not. And so this can be super easy. So we just have to write a function here. So just a public function. So maybe we'll just say is admin, something that simple. And so we could return, let me get that right on the third try. So this, referencing this model, this entity, this user, and then we could say their role, and we'll just do a nice little triple equals there, and then just say admin. So if their role is equal to admin, good. They're all good, no worries. If not, they're a guest or treated like some other role, right? So that's the advantage of doing a string instead of a Boolean there. We can have many different roles. So if we had like is student or is instructor or is Lambda staff, we could have those distinctions. So that's just probably a premature optimization, but something we can think about. All right, awesome. So now we have this sort of, anybody can come in here and register. Actually, we'll have to migrate our database. So the way, let me see here, let me clear this. So the way Laravel works from the command line is that it has this tool called Artisan, Laravel Artisan, and that is a sort of command line helper that lets us do a whole bunch of really awesome scaffolding and other functionality that we just need the command line for. So if we run the command php artisan, this shows us all the commands that we can run with Laravel. And there's some great ones in here. For instance, to make the authentication, we've got this really simple make auth, and it just scaffolds the basic login and registration flows for us. So all we have to do is download a new Laravel project, run this command, and we've already got authentication out of the box, so we don't have to worry about it here. What else can we do? We've got all these like nice little make commands here, so it's really easy to scaffold files that you're constantly recreating over and over and over again. What else is important in here? We've got these migration ones, and these are the ones that I was looking for here. This is how you rerun those migrations or roll them back or drop them. So if you make a change to them, you make sure that you have the latest version of your schema. And this is really great when you're starting out and you're rapidly iterating and you're like, okay, maybe my database we're gonna tweak some columns here. We're gonna rename this column. We're gonna, oh, this one has to be unique, or we want to have a default value there. And so you can very quickly just use migrations to get up and running, and you don't have to always be like dropping your database with SQL or something like that, or going into like Postgres admin or something like that and trying to drop it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run PHP artisan, and then migrate, and then fresh, and then I'm going to run the seeder as well. So you can pass commands to these. If we ran the help command, one too many dashes there, you can see a lot of these commands have additional options that we can use to run. And so the one that I was going to run was the seeder, because I've already got a seeder set up to populate all of those student files we had before. So actually, if I just ran that, migrate, fresh, and what that does is it drops the database, the existing tables, and just migrates all of those migrations there. So if I just ran that without the seeder, so look what we have. We don't have any students left. We don't have any users here. So, but if I run it with the seeder and pre-populate it with all that extra information, and we go back to our Chrome, boom, we've got all this extra data here. And so the way I set that seeder up was in, as you might have guessed, the seeds directory, which is inside our database here. So that's really great if you're working on a team and you need to continuously model your data and you want to see it in the interface there. Maybe you've got a front-end engineer and a back-end engineer. The front-end engineer doesn't want to have to come in there and populate the database every time. So you have a seeder, and they can run one simple command and be up and running here. So we have the students table seeder, and all this is doing is it has a factory that basically grabs the model class that we had earlier and creates 11 of them for us. And so that factory, as you might have guessed, is in database factories. And what this is doing is this is saying, okay, for these attributes on this class, generate some fake data for us. So out of the box, Laravel has the really great faker library installed. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really awesome fake data library here. But you can just kind of say, I just need a fake first name, a fake last name, I need some sort of email, I need a URL here, and then I've got some hard-coded information. So the GitHub is just going to github.com, but we don't need anything more than that. And the profile photo is coming from unsplash.com, and we're just grabbing a businessy person and making sure that we're getting a sort of a random image every time. And that's that. That's all this dummy data that we're using to populate our database with. So again, it really super powerful to get some fake data with and just start playing with and get it rolling here. So we've added this sort of guest role to what we're talking about here. Let's keep on rolling here. So let's see. So we've got a role, and we're going to open it up so people can see who they've contacted in the past here. So a user, so now we've got to define some extra rules here. And one of them being that this admin section that we have is probably should only be viewable by admins here. And so I guess we could come in here and kind of use that guest tag and stuff like that we were using earlier. What we really want to be doing is using a middleware, which actually looks at the request level to make sure that people who are unauthorized or shouldn't be here or on this view are appropriately blocked out here. So in our HTTP folder, right, we've got this sort of controller section here, and we've also got this middleware directory here. So this is where Laravel is doing a lot of the things like authentication, checking that CSRF token is valid, and sort of that higher level logic that you can use to make your make sure that people are going in the appropriate way within your application. So let's look in here. What we're probably going to want to do is probably create an admin middleware for ourselves here. Let's go into our artisan command here, and we'll just say PHP artisan make, right? Because that's the maker, but it'll scaffold it for us. Middleware. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and hit the H tag there, the help tag, so we can see if we need to add any extra details here. And nope, it's just the name of the class. This one's pretty straightforward. Sometimes I like to check beforehand, especially if it's one that I haven't used in a while. We'll just go ahead and just say make middleware admin. Okay, awesome. So let's see here. So authenticate, and then that's not exactly what we're looking for. So what we can do here is now we can define our logic here and protect to make sure that this request is we're making sure that whatever logic we need in order for the person to get to the next request is being handled here. So let's see here. So if, it's going to be a really simple if statements here. So one thing that Laravel has is this really handy auth helper that will let you grab the currently authenticated user. So if, and so we could say auth user, and then we could say, what else do we need? We need their role, and maybe does not equal, actually we could just say, yeah, does not equal admin. Something like that. And actually, we did this logic already. We put this in our user model. So we could just say is admin, right? Because we already put it over here. We made this easier for ourselves already. So we just have to check that right there. So now how do we add middleware to something like this? So there are two different ways to do it. One is in our controllers, and that's a great way to do it. The other way, though, is to do it in our routes folder. And I generally like that approach a little bit better. Teams I've worked on have liked that a little bit better, just because it keeps everything a little bit cleaner. So your routes are in charge of the middleware, and then your controllers are just in charge of all the logic that they're handling. It keeps your controller a little bit cleaner here. And let's just kind of test that out to make sure. So let's see, we can add this middleware. And we're going to want to say this should be admin, right? Oop, I'm pushing the wrong buttons. Alrighty, so now if we give this a refresh, class admin does not exist. Oh, because I have to capitalize it. Alrighty. What is going on? Oh, do I have to register it? Yeah, that's what's going on. Forgot to register. So wrap middleware will come down here. So sometimes you can if you don't know the inner workings a little bit, you might get a little burned sometimes. You might get an error message there, but the messages tend to be pretty good, right? So class admin doesn't exist. It's like, okay, there's something going on here, something I can't quite figure out. Maybe I didn't register it. So I'm just going to go ahead and add admin, and then add a reference to our class here. So this should just be app, HTTP, middleware, and this will be admin. And that should take care of it for us. Oop. Alrighty, let's get that over. Okay, call to a member function is admin on all. So this is almost like TDD, right? Almost like just handling ourselves to these error messages here. Call to a member function, and this is saying that I think Laravel 5.8 has a new feature that makes it easier to not forget about the routes. Yeah, I think it does for forgetting. It does have like some sort of auto register feature, but I don't know if I either haven't enabled that or what's going on. But I think you're onto something there, Jonathan. Let's see. Call to member function is admin on null. So I guess something is going on there. Oh, that's the wrong button. With our is admin method, probably more our. It looks like the user was not being added as nicely as I was hoping for. Maybe it's like that. Nope. Alrighty. Larry mentioned earlier today, Laracon said he was always forgetting about the routes law. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Laracon was today. Laracon online. So if you were following along with that, that's super awesome. So basically, the Laravel community is very, very friendly. It has tons of events all year long. There are so many great. There's a really great in-person meetup or convention every year. And then there is the online one, and that happened to be today. We kind of got our timing a little bit mixed up, but that is definitely something that you guys could attend. And so for some reason, this is not cooperating with me just the way I was hoping for, but that's okay. We can go ahead. And now I bet this will work if we go like this, because we're just letting it go into the request. But you see there how you could add that logic just right here. Maybe we just return false. And say, oh, that's probably not what we wanted. But anyway, you see how the middleware is catching in the route there and blocking us from getting to that page there. So this is where middlewares can come in handy. And you can really control your access to the page there. But let's not let this part of it stop us here. Let's continue working on the rest of the page here. So instead of admin, we can add our logic in here a little bit more. So let's see here. So we don't want, basically what we're trying to prevent is our admins from seeing this add, or our non-admins from seeing this add student page. And so we can go about this in a slightly different way here. So we could say if the user, and this is, I know for sure this will work here. We'll grab the auth, then we'll grab the user, and then we'll grab is admin. So that's true. We're going to hide this. We're going to let them see this form. If not, they can't see it. So if we go to our page now, and that should be working for us, I think we're going to need to register again because we blew out our database. And we're going to go ahead and add me. Oop, there we go, password. Okay, so we got to verify again. We can verify the email. And oh, did we not catch all of it? Yeah, we've got to make this a little bit larger here. But as you can see, we couldn't see the rest of the form that we could see earlier. And so Laravel makes it, again, super, super easy for us to do this kind of logic. Versus if we got rid of that check, just like that, came over here, refresh the page, all of a sudden, all this information is back in our DOM. So you can really make very nice views that way, and use some of this conditional logic here to take care of it. Let's look at it, like, what if I wanted to make myself a whatchamacallit, an admin here. So the way I would do this is I would go into my terminal, which I guess I minimized, not popping up. Okay, great. So another thing that Laravel has out of the box is this tinker command. So PHP artisan tinker. And what this does is this actually is a shell that we can manipulate the data and use Eloquent within our within the command line here. So if I said like app, and let's just write it real fast. Command here. So not student, but if I wanted to say users or user, give me all the users that are in the database. Oh, that didn't work here. That's not good. Let's see why that didn't work. Let me try the students query. Do I need to semicolon it? No. Used to not have to do that. Well, in theory, that should work very nicely for us. I just reinstalled 5.8, and I don't have it set up perfectly on this machine just yet. So I'm wondering if that is the issue there with Tinker. But in a perfect world, we could have written a little bit of code and said, give me a user, and given that they have, basically give me the user and then modify their value to admin, and then they should be good to go there. But you know, we don't even need that. We can keep on rolling without that. So what are we trying to do though? We're trying to say that these, if I have contacted the user, then I should be able to see all of my student contacts. So what are we going to need for that? So let's go to our first off, we're going to need to have some sort of a relationship here, which is pretty interesting. So we have a student, and we don't have like a student contacts table, so we're going to need something like that here. And actually, we're going to need a full model. So let's go ahead and whip that up for ourselves. So we're going to make a PHP artisan, and I had that alias to PA for myself. It's a lot to take out or type out every single time. So alias to PA. So as you can see, that's just PHP artisan for me. I'm just going to say PA. Make model, and we're just going to call this, let's just call it student contact. For lack of a better term, we're going to need a migration for that. We've already have a controller for it, so we don't necessarily need to create another controller. But now we have a model created for ourselves and a migration, right? Which is super awesome. So all of a sudden in our migrations folder, we've got the student contacts. Within our app directory, we have this model scaffolded for us really nicely. So Laravel, again, taking care of all this information for us. So a student contact, that's going to have an integer, an unsigned integer on it. So let's see here, because we're going to want to reference the user ID, because a user can have many student contacts, but it could also, I guess, be nullable as well. Well, we'll think about that a little bit more as we get to it. So this is a, we'll keep that not nullable for now. And then in our student contact here, we'll go ahead and we're going to need that fillable method just to make sure we can assign this later. So we're going to have a user ID. And now we can start figuring out our relationships. And with Eloquent, it's very, very easy to set these up here because all we have to do is create methods on our models. So we can have this public function here, and we would call this our user. And so we just return that this model, so this belongs to, hey, welcome. And this would just belong to a user, real simple. Alrighty. And we'd have to define the inverse as well. And maybe a user can have many, right? That kind of makes sense for us. So we'd come down here, we'd say a public function. We'd call this student contacts or something like that. And so then we just return this. Gotta get the right character there. So has many. And this would be student contact, right? Great. Oh, we'll make sure that's class. Perfect. And just like that, we've defined the relationship for ourselves here. And that's just going to throw an error for us. So we'll go ahead and camel case that a little bit. Awesome. So we all of a sudden have to find our relationships here. I wish Tinker was working because then we could play with this a little bit more and start using it. And I think that would just be very nice. So now we've got to update our logic a bit within our controller here that we were writing before. So let's check this. So our student contact controller, that's kind of what we're working with here. So what are we going to want to do? So, and maybe we're actually going to want to reference the student as well in our student contacts table. That way we know who exactly we contact. So it's almost becoming like a join table here. So we'll make another relationship here. So we'll call this a student ID because it is a student contact, right? So again, we can kind of copy this. This is going to belong to a student. Oop, be good if I could spell. Alrighty here. I'll just be a student class. And then our student, actually we can just copy this straight from our users table, right? Because they will have many contacts. Awesome. So that is all looking pretty good. And so now we can go to our controller here. So if there is an authenticated user, go ahead, and we're actually going to create a student contact. And there are a couple of ways we could do this, actually. So one way to do it would be to kind of do it as we're doing it here and kind of say this is the user ID. It would be something like, give me the auth, give me the user, give me the ID. And then we'd have to do something similar for student ID. And we have the student already through the route model binding. Then we just grab the ID. So something like this should work. What else here? And notice we have student contact in here twice. We actually have a student contact. This should be this should say mail on it, but we can leave that for a feature refactor. So if we have an authenticated student, create this record for us. Let's see here. So back to our. So let's see if this works. If we're doing TDD, we can really test this out here, but this should be working for us just fine here. So we're authenticated, we're logged in. So we're just going to write our name. And I guess if they're authenticated, we could populate that for them as well. So maybe this is the UX designer and me saying we should make it a little bit easier for them. So let's see here. Where's their name and where's the value? So we're repopulating this if it's old, but let's see here. Maybe we can do this something else. So maybe if it has old. Otherwise, this could get kind of complicated. Let's just say instead of the old name, we'll say if auth user exists. Let's do it like this. Then we'll just grab their name. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Name. Otherwise, we'll do the whatchamacallit here. That old name that we were talking about. Alrighty. Great. Yep. So now my name is getting populated here because I am authenticated. So this is working out pretty nicely for our reverse job board here. And then, okay, so that's kind of a nice feature here. If we log out, what's going to happen? Let's see here. So we're building a, let's see, I got a question here. Just a little bit of a recap of what we're building. Yeah, so we're just building a reverse job board for Lambda students. So if a potential employer was looking for Lambda students and wanted to get in touch with them directly, all they would have to do is come here and find the student they wanted to hire, see their GitHub portfolio, and then get in touch with them. So that's all we're building here. So as we can see, now that we're no longer authenticated, you can't see the name in here. So again, like nice little things like that, super easy to do. So let's log back in though. That's kind of what we're interested in. And we'll say password, cool. And there's nothing on this admin page because I'm no longer an admin. Let's say we're contacting ILTA. And great. And so maybe we would have this extra information on the user as well. But for now, I don't think we have to worry about this as much. Just the name is kind of a nice touch. So we'll say I work for Lambda, Nick at Lambda School, and hi there, whatever the message is. Alrighty. Oh, did we not migrate this? Student contacts? I thought I did migrate. Oh, I didn't migrate after. So if you just run PHP artisan migrate, it will create the table afterwards. So we can't add anything to the table if the table doesn't exist. But it's good that this logic looks like it was working. A student ID doesn't have a default value. Oh, and that's because we have that we didn't add that to our mass assignment as well. So we were trying to here we only have the user ID, but we're trying to inject a student ID as well. So we need to make sure that we let that be assignable, right? Alrighty, third time's the charm. Let's see how we do. Nice. So our message got sent, and so now our user here has some students that they've contacted here. So let's see if we can wire up that view pretty quickly. Alrighty. So where is that? That is in our admin controller. So in this index here. So given that we have our authenticated user, and we want to receive their student contacts, right? So this would be this is called contacts for right here. Actually, I don't know why we're not calling it what it is. Let's call it what it is. Let's see if we DD this. Actually, we can use the collection helper here. Keep it simple. Oh, keep hitting that button on accident. And we give this a refresh here. All we can see is now we have that student contact that we created earlier, right? It was that simple. So all of a sudden we've got this relationship. And now, you know, it would be nice if we loaded that student ID on here. So we can do what's called eager loading or lazy loading. And there are a couple of different ways we can do that here. So we can go ahead and do something like this. So with student, and that should, we might have to put a get on here. So again, Eloquent makes it really easy for us to just sort of chain and work with the API and get this extra data that we're looking for. So let's see here. Ooh, where do we go? Attributes, original. Yeah, and then in this relations data, we've got all that student data here. So actually, if we go back to our die and dump here, we can make this a little bit easier for ourselves. So let's actually call this toArray. And I'll just go ahead and do this like that. And now, just like this, we have that student information that we would need to render some more information about this contact here. And that's called eager loading in Laravel and probably other places. So if you go to the documentation, you say eager loading or lazy eager loading, however you want to handle it, you can go ahead and make that happen. And I'm thinking about this, and this is probably what we're going to want to have happen every time I call student contacts, right? I'm probably always going to want to make sure that we're getting the student information here. So I'm going to actually go ahead and go back to student contacts in my user. Let's say has many, and so this will, I think I can just append this onto there. Oh, that's the wrong button again. And that's the wrong page. Yeah, so now it's always coming through. So we instead of having it be on this one particular instance, we've actually added it and made sure that we're always loading the student relationship when we're calling the student contact for our user, because we're always going to need that, right? So that's just another thing. And you don't have to do it that way. It's just a way to do it, a way to make it a little bit nicer. Cool. So now what we're going to want to do is send this data down to our view. So we're going to compact it, and that's just a little helper here, just to make passing the data down a little bit easier, keep it in collection, all that good stuff. I get rid of that marker there. Okay, cool. So now we can go to our admin blade, right? Because that's where we were working, and we've got a whole bunch of files open here. Let me clean this up a little bit more, make it a little easier to see what we're working with. Alrighty, almost there. Cool. So we're working with our admin page. And what do we want to see? Well, first off, we can hide that a little bit more. So let's maybe have like a div, like a car or something like that. And I'm actually going to grab some of this boilerplate just to make it a little bit easier. Oop, did I lose everything? Did I grab the wrong spot? Okay, so we've got our student contacts. Okay, I got to close that div. And now, what if we just did like an unordered list, and we'll just for each, and this would be student contacts as student contact, right? Use the singular. Real simple. Alrighty. And let's just for now kind of say die and dump that, or not die and dump, but output the student contacts, and then we'll just say their student. And then we'll say first name, something like that. All right, let's see if that works for us. Yeah, nice. And we can see that we got in touch with Elta there. And maybe it would be useful if that would link to her profile page or something like that. So we'll make this an A tag. Oop. Here we go. So we want this to link to the student contact path, right? Because that's a helper method we have defined on our student. Alrighty there. And we'll grab this first name, or this closing tag there, first name. We probably want their last name too, just to make it, I gotta concatenate. Awesome. And then go ahead and tweak this here. We'll add the last name. Alrighty, and now if we go back, undefined method, path. Oh, because we're calling it on the student contact, not the student, and that is my mistake. So we gotta make sure we're calling it on the right model. And nice. And now all of a sudden we've got a nice link to our student there. And so this is her contact page. And just like that, right? We very quickly added some additional features, some additional functionality, and it was super, super easy to get up and running. So any questions so far on that or how it works? How we can add features here, how we can work with Laravel. Now we've been moving a little quick here, but we're just keeping it high level for everybody. Intermediate question, let's go for it. I think we're some migrations for wiping out a dev database. So server migration for updating a production database without wiping the data. Yes. So typically the process for that looks like in development, you're kind of going back and forth, right? Your initial development. You're like, okay, I'm just going to handle these until they're right. And then once you're in production, you don't want to be like resetting your database because you'll lose that data. So what you have to do is write migrations that like physically migrate the data. So what you would do is write something like, okay, let's say like all of a sudden student ID, we no longer need student ID on this table here. So I would go ahead and I'd write a migration. So PA make migration. And then I say like remove whatever column. So like student ID from, what was this, the student contacts table? So what you would do is you would create a migration that would handle that for you. So that way when you run your migrations, so in your production server, you only run your migrations forward. You never end up rolling them back. In fact, some people take the down methods out just so that way they can never be rolled back on accident. And so this is student contacts table. So all of a sudden, all we have to do here is probably say it's like, what is it? This drop, no, not, let's see, this table, yeah, sorry, table. So table, drop, column, and then this would be student ID. And you would go forward like that, right? And maybe you would do something where you needed to add a column, and maybe this would be like, what would we call this? This would be another unsigned integer, and maybe you're renaming this label, right? So you would say like, okay, let's call this student whatever special ID or something like that. And what you would do in here is then you could actually write a query to say like app student contact class, get me all of them, right? Or you could do all, and then loop over each of them, and then go ahead and write a method in line here, pass in the student contact for each of these. This is an intermediate question, but it's a good question because it's something that I don't think is super clear within the world of Laravel. And then you would just kind of say student contact, update. What are we saying here? Update. What is this? The student special ID with the existing value. So with whatever the existing value of the student contact's student ID is. Something like that. Oh, and that should not be, that should be a comma. And then something like this. So that way when you push the migration forward, it would create this column in the database. Then it would make that update, transfer the data to where you need it to go, and then you would drop the column once you're done with it. And you could wrap this up in a transaction or something like that. But that's generally how I would approach something like that. That way your migrations are always moving forward instead of on your production server. So you're not like doing that refresh business. That doesn't work on production, right? Good question here. Any other Laravel questions? Go ahead and remove that. Have you used Slim PHP? If so, how does it compare to Laravel? I have not. I have used like vanilla PHP, which is not ideal sometimes. And I've used Laravel. Those are kind of my PHP experiences. I've used a little bit of, actually that's not true. I've used a lot of Drupal, WordPress. Those are not frameworks. Those are a little slightly different, but not the extent of my Laravel experience. So I can't comment on Slim PHP. I'm sure it's wonderful for the people who like it. I'm not one to bash frameworks or anything like that. I don't think that there's anything productive in there. So if it works for you and you like it, awesome. I don't think I could make a comparison. I'm not well informed enough about Slim PHP. But good question though. Any other Laravel questions or questions about the ecosystem a little bit? Maybe we can do that in a little bit more detail here. So I think we've got a pretty good sense here of what the Laravel workflow looks like, how we can, what the important directories are. There's a lot of other directories in here, but the important ones are app, database, and resources. All the other ones, and I guess tests. And this is where you keep your unit tests. And actually, I bet if we ran our test suite right now, yeah, we'd have a failure. But not that many, right? We got rid of that Lambda staff can register functionality, but or only Lambda staff. But for the most part, our tests were okay there. So if you wanted to write a test, you can kind of come in here and write some test functionality. There's a really great, and this is kind of beyond the scope of an intro to Laravel, so I'm getting into TDD, but you can do some really awesome tests in here. We've got a whole bunch. So if you want access to the repo, definitely let me throw that in the chat here just so everybody has access to it if you want to play with the code on your own. Let me make sure I'm putting that in right. So that if you guys want to take a look, that's all there. As you can see, we're doing some fun stuff with mocking. The factories come in handy here as well. We're basically doing some just tests here, making sure that the functionality is working as expected, the validations are working as expected as well. But we were about to take a look at the overarching Laravel ecosystem and some of the other cool things that Laravel has in the ecosystem. So let's take a look here. I guess the ecosystem tab would be the point point of look. So let's talk about Nova. Let's talk about Spark, Lumen, Envoyer, Horizon. And there was one more that I wanted to look at. Oh, Forge. And that gets its own tab. So let's actually talk about Forge first. Deploying any app is always a bit of a hassle sometimes. Forge makes it super, super easy. All you have to do is hook up your GitHub repo, hook up your DigitalOcean account, and Forge automatically deploys this. This is also run by the creator of Laravel, who is Taylor Otwell, and he is joined by Mohammed Saeed. And they both, I think there might be one other new hire more on the community side of things. But the two of them are basically running the show at Laravel. And they are working on all these projects. So Forge makes it super, super easy to spin up a server, deploy your Laravel app onto it, hook it up to your domain. And it's what I use for all my server management. It's an incredible, incredible app and developer experience. So that's like first-party support as well. Then there's Envoyer that does kind of in the similar vein as Forge. It does zero downtime deployment. So that way, and it's pretty cheap. It's only $10 a month. So if you have an app in production, you have a lot of users on it, you want to make sure that when you deploy code, you're not taking the whole site down and your users are getting frustrated because the site is down or anything like that. This just makes it really easy to flip over your server and you're good to go. So that is Envoyer. Horizon is for queue management, sort of like Redis or anything like that. And so that is all handled here. So again, that is Taylor and the Laravel team really taking the initiative to make it the developer experience really awesome for us. Then there's Lumen. Lumen is a pared down, stripped down version of Laravel, and it's really awesome for writing APIs with. So if you just are like, you know what, Laravel's got a lot out of the box, I just want to use a little bit of Laravel and maybe create a API or something like that, Lumen is the way to go. So it's like the tiny version of Laravel, so to speak. Laravel Spark is another really great helper for everybody. What it does is it's a Laravel application, but if you're creating like a SaaS app or a digital product or something like that, Laravel takes care of a lot of like your user management, your payment logic, and a ton of other like little details that are always super, super annoying to set up with your with your SaaS app, like subscriptions, teams, team building, two-factor auth, APIs, all this like little nitty-gritty details that you're like, man, I really wish I didn't have to write all this logic. I wish it was taken care of for me. Spark will let you do that. And it's a pretty awesome way to get up and running. And then finally, there's Laravel Nova, which is one of my absolute favorite parts of the Laravel ecosystem. It's a really awesome admin panel, so you can kind of just get up and running with managing the data for your users and for everybody else in your application. So again, it's just another like little detail that makes working within the Laravel ecosystem super, super nice and relatively reasonably priced. Only $100 for one project, kind of forever. So you're kind of good to go there with your information. So that is the Laravel ecosystem in a nutshell. So any questions on that or Laravel again, if any have come up? Could you, in theory, use Nova in the same way you use Spark, like use it as an app to build on top of? Kind of. Spark is more customer-facing, if that makes sense, versus Nova, which is supposed to be admin-facing. So as an administrator, like Nova is perfect for me because I can hop in there, manage like CRM details and things like that. Versus like if I was a customer and I was trying to use an application, that like it could work theoretically, but that feels more like something Spark would let you do. Like there's no billing set up in Nova. There's no it would just be fairly complicated. So it is more of an admin panel. And so it's a slightly different use case than something like Spark. But that's a great question. Theoretically, sure, you could make it work, but it wouldn't necessarily be a great product experience, if that makes sense. Any other Laravel questions? PHP questions even? Alrighty then. Well, if you are a Lambda student, you know where to find me in Slack. If you are not, you know where to find me on Twitter. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you for coming along on this little jaunt through Laravel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get a little bit more of a perspective about excuse me, what Laravel is, how you can use it to build applications. Hope it's been informative for you. So best of luck out there. Go try Laravel tonight. All you have to do, laravel.com, go to the documentation, follow the installation guide, and you can be coding your next great app in pretty much no time. It's really incredible. So enjoy Laravel. Best of luck with it, and we will see you next time. So take care.